Right, I've had these Altra Lone Peak 8s for a while now, and at first I was even considering actually keeping these, but now my views have changed slightly, and that's what I want to get into today. So hey, I'm Nick from Barefoot Run Review, and here today to look at the Altra Lone Peak 8. And to be honest, you might think that this is a strange shoe for me to review, but actually I think there are definitely areas where Ultras and more cushioned shoes can work a little better than minimal shoes. It's not about being minimal or barefoot all the time, it's about using it as a tool. But let's get onto that another time. So, the Altra Lone Peak 8. This isn't too dissimilar from the Lone Peak 7. We still see very similar aspects of the shoe, including this heel counter that we kind of saw previously. The outsole, again, very similar, and even the shape of the shoe is quite similar as well. But where are the differences? Well, there are a few differences. The upper has changed slightly. There's a few small aesthetic differences, and also I feel that the fit maybe changed that tiny little bit. So let's start with the fit. So anyone that knows the Lone Peak from the past, it used to be that big skater shoe, kind of cushy, kind of comfortable shoe. And to be honest, it's changed a little bit throughout its history, but it's still kind of got that cushy feel. So you slip your foot in there and you still feel that kind of cushioned heel and material around the ankle there. And then looking into that toe box, we still got that wider Ultra squared off toe box. You look around here, it's actually a lot more squared off than a lot of the other Ultras, and that's kind of important for some people, at least anyway, especially if you've got that wider toe splay. But there's other aspects of the shoe which kind of help people feel a little more comfortable depending on your foot. So the big thing here is actually the depth of this shoe. So this is a deeper Ultra than most other models. So you can see it's actually pretty flexible, being one thing, but it also is pretty baggy, especially around this forefoot area. So if you're someone that has this higher volume foot all the way up, actually, then you'll find a much better fit here. But when it comes to feel, that can be very different, and especially on the trail, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So looking into this heel here, and also the heel lock, so this is a tiny bit stiffer than you'd see from some of the other Ultras, or at least Ultra Lone Peak models from the past, but it's still fairly flexible. I never found any type of issue in terms of like rubbing or anything like that. It's got the second eyelet in here, so you can do the lace lock, which was pretty good. Although I feel that maybe this heel is a little bit wide, a little bit loose, and that caused a little bit of kind of lateral side to side motion in the heel. I didn't feel like I was fully locked down like I would in a Timp 5 or maybe even an Olympus. So something just to know if you do have that narrower heel. And because of that baggy feeling up here, the more voluminous shoe, you can actually get a great fit for somebody that needs that a little extra room across the top. This lacing can spread all the way out, but that doesn't really translate into the midfoot round here. So this is something I actually had an issue with in the Lone Peak 7. I found these overlays here actually was constricting. It wasn't quite wide enough. So if you're used to maybe like the Lone Peak 5 or something prior to that, I'd actually suggest going for a wide version in this Lone Peak 8 and even the Lone Peak 7 if you're looking for that. I found this one a little better than the Lone Peak 7, but still, it wasn't really perfect. So. Okay, let's get onto the feel of the shoe. So, it's going to be kind of similar to the Lone Peaks of the past. The only difference I would say is it's got stiffer. You can see that, yeah, there's a bit of flexibility here in the forefoot, a little bit torsionally, but around this heel, it's definitely got quite a bit stiffer than it used to be. And some will like that a little more. It kind of gives a little bit of protection underfoot. You get kind of that rock plate kind of effect, and you don't really hurt your feet as much. But personally, as a 25mm stack height shoe, I don't think it really needs that stiffness at all. It just needs a little bit of cushion in there. And it does an okay job if I wanted to use it maybe for a longer ultra or a race. I think that's kind of like a nice medium ground in terms of like having some cushion and some protection, especially for those later miles. But I also don't think it's great for any of those technical trails because you seem to lose a little bit of ground feel. So all in all, the feel of this is okay. I did have one issue which actually comes back to the actual fit of the shoe, and I kind of felt like it wasn't great on technical terrain. So I was slipping around. I mentioned in this heel, it's a little bit open, a little bit wide, and I was kind of like moving in the shoe slightly. And that's maybe because the shoe is either a little too large, a little too voluminous for me. But in terms of length, it's definitely true to size. I couldn't come down anymore. So it's something to keep note of. If you have a shallow foot, this isn't it's not going to be for you. If you even have an average depth foot, might not be for you. Basically, it meant that on more technical terrain, you were just slipping and sliding around. So I feel it kind of did a little better on those longer runs, which are kind of easy, maybe mellow trails, kind of flowy trails. It absolutely worked. And that's why at first I thought that this was actually going to stick in my rotation. I thought I was going to use it as my long range shoe. But after using it in that rocky terrain, I kind of felt, oh, okay, this bit isn't quite right for me. And I felt unnerved coming on some like downhills, some rocky downhills. So for me, a bit of a shame because this outsole, I actually quite like it. It's the Max Track outsole. We saw it in the last in the Lone Peak 7 as well. It just got that little bit more tacky and it stuck to rocks a bit more. And I'm not going to suggest that it's anything like a Vibram outsole like we've seen on the Timp 5, but it's definitely better than it used to be. It used to be pretty bad in general. Like Altra weren't known for great outsoles. This is definitely an improvement. We see this in the Superior 6 as well. Definitely a great improvement. So one thing I do actually love about the Lone Peak is the depth of this toe box. You've got loads of room for your toes to flex up and down. You don't feel like you're constricted in this area at all. And I like that purely because your toes shouldn't be constricted. Your toes need to be able to move in all directions to be able to adapt to the terrain around you. So this is why I'd say this is probably one of the best toe boxes that you can get from Altra. All right, let's talk about the durability of this shoe. So we know from Altra, it's not always the best thing. So the durability of a lot of Altras in the past have been a little bit poor. A lot of them I pushed to maybe 500k, 500 miles even maybe, and they were definitely falling apart at that point. I know the Timp 4, that was pretty bad. My wife had a pair, probably only got them to about 300 kilometers. That's not good for a shoe. So what do we think about the Lone Peak 8? Well, there's not been many updates in terms of the 7 to the 8, so I imagine it's going to be pretty similar. This outsole, I did say it's quite kind of tacky, and that usually means it wears out a bit quicker. So if you are running on the road at all, this is going to wear pretty quick. I don't suggest that at all. Looking at the upper, we have overlays coming all the way around the toe box and then over around the midfoot as well here. Nicely protected, that's great. I have heard something about peeling of these overlays. It's not a huge issue, I suppose, but also not great in terms of, I don't know, aesthetics and maybe a bit of protection too. That's not really what you want. This upper material over the toe box here, like we said, this has changed slightly. I didn't actually see any issues in the Lone Peak 7 here. I know we have seen issues on the Olympus line, so maybe that was a reaction to the material they were using there. But I think this is still going to be fairly resistant. I don't really know of any other reason why they changed it, but also I've got no reason to disbelieve why it should be bad either. One thing to note is maybe internally here, especially around the heel. I did say that you moved in the heel quite a bit. And usually when you move in the heel, you actually create friction and you might end up ripping through that inner in there. Some people with more narrow heels often find that. And especially in this shoe, if you've got a narrower heel, you are going to be moving a fair bit. You might actually end up ripping through this inner liner. So there could be a durability issue. The midsole, well, yes, it flattens out. Altra always flattens out pretty quickly, I'd say. But considering the rest of the shoe, with the outsole, with this upper and stuff, I don't really see that as much of an issue. Yes, it might not feel like a brand new shoe after maybe 250 kilometers, but again, that's not a big thing. Like you want that ground feel anyway, so that's what we're aiming for. Okay, to the conclusion. So is the Lone Peak 8 worth the update from the Lone Peak 7? Then probably not, really. It's if you've still got a Lone Peak 7 that's still going well, just keep that. It'll probably do a very similar job. Should you buy the Lone Peak 8 next if you can't get a Lone Peak 7? Yeah, it fits pretty similar. Go for the same size. You'll do pretty well. Would I choose this over the other Ultras? So I'm thinking maybe Superior is kind of similar. Others, maybe the Timp and the Olympus, they're in a different kind of realm. They're stiffer, they're bigger in general, bigger stack height, different shoes. So really the only competitor is the Superior here. For me, I prefer the Superior as more of a minimal runner. I want as little stack height as I can usually get with a tiny bit of protection, and that's what you get with the Superior. Moving up to this Lone Peak, it's 4 millimeters higher. I don't really feel that you get much benefit out of that. The one big thing though, the fit on the Superior is very different. It's very shallow in comparison. So if you've got a shallow foot, awesome, brilliant. If you've got an average foot, I make it work by replacing the insole. But if you've got that deeper foot, you're probably going to have to go into this Lone Peak just for that bigger, more relaxed kind of fit. So as for a feeling, I would probably not use this for short distances. I would use it for long distances for definite. But also, I wouldn't take it into any really rocky technical terrain. I wouldn't take it in the Alps and stuff because your downhill will be pretty compromised in terms of slipping around in that shoe. It's not going to feel super comfortable. So it's something to keep note of if you're on nice smooth trails. Some of the Colorado trails are really nice and smooth because they're made for bikes. You can just flow through those and these will work absolutely fine. Also, another thing, if you're just going hiking, the Lone Peak can work absolutely fine too. That's because you're not putting as much stress and pressure throughout the whole shoe and you're not going to be slipping around as much. And really, you want to look for comfort more than technical aspects of the shoe, especially if you're like a through hiker. I know this is a perfect through hiker shoe and many people use it. Actually works really well because you get that relaxed fit, you get that option to splay the toes quite a bit as well, so you avoid any of the blistering issues and things like that. This is where this could actually work as well. So for me, it's actually a pass. For anyone with a higher volume foot, I think it's probably a good one for you. Anybody else? Maybe not.